Q. What type of interaction is observed when an animal feeds on plant material, causing harm to the plant? Herbivora. 2019. Q. Predation can result in the death of the prey, but what is the main difference between predation and parasitism? In predation, the predator kills the prey, whereas in parasitism, the parasite typically harms the host without killing it immediately. 2020. Q. What evolutionary concept best explains how predators and prey evolve in response to each other's traits? Coevolution. 2021. This detailed lecture focuses on the major types of species interactions, their impacts, and how these interactions shape the dynamics of ecosystems. The inclusion of previous year questions will aid in reinforcing key concepts crucial for the UGC NET JRF environmental science exam. You said. Biological invasions. ChatGPT said. Biological invasions. An overview. Biological invasions refer to the process by which species, often non-native or exotic, are introduced into new habitats and spread, resulting in significant ecological, economic, and social impacts. These invasive species can disrupt ecosystems, outcompete native species, alter habitat structures, and lead to long-term environmental changes. Biological invasions have become a significant global issue, contributing to biodiversity loss, altering ecosystem services, and affecting human activities. Definition and causes of biological invasions. Biological invasion occurs when a species is introduced to a new environment, either intentionally or accidentally, where it establishes itself and spreads, often without the natural predators, competitors, or diseases that regulate its population in its native habitat. The factors contributing to biological invasions include human activity, human transportation, trade, and agricultural practices are the primary means by which species are transported to new areas. Globalization, urbanization, and infrastructure development have greatly increased the movement of species, sometimes facilitating their spread. Climate change. Alterations in climate patterns can create favorable conditions for non-native species to thrive, especially in areas where native species are struggling due to changing environmental conditions. Shifts in temperature, precipitation, and seasonality can make ecosystems more susceptible to invasions. Disturbances in ecosystems. Disturbances such as deforestation, land use changes, fires, or even the introduction of new crops or livestock can create ecological vacancies. These openings are often exploited by invasive species that can rapidly take over disturbed or degraded areas. Trade and transportation. Invasive species are biological invasions. ChatGPT said. Biological invasions. An overview. Biological invasions refer to the process by which species, often non-native or exotic, are introduced into new habitats and spread, resulting in significant ecological, economic, and social impacts. These invasive species can disrupt ecosystems, outcompete native species, alter habitat structures, and lead to long-term environmental changes. Biological invasions have become a significant global issue, contributing to biodiversity loss, altering ecosystem services, and affecting human activities. Definition and causes of biological invasions. Biological invasion occurs when a species is introduced to a new environment, either intentionally or accidentally, where it establishes itself and spreads, often without the natural predators, competitors, or diseases that regulate its population in its native habitat. The factors contributing to biological invasions include human activity, human transportation, trade, and agricultural practices are the primary means by which species are transported to new areas. Globalization, urbanization, and infrastructure development have greatly increased the movement of species, sometimes facilitating their spread. Climate change. Alterations in climate patterns can create favorable conditions for non-native species to thrive, especially in areas where native species are struggling due to changing environmental conditions. Shifts in temperature, precipitation, and seasonality can make ecosystems more susceptible to invasions. Disturbances in ecosystems. Disturbances such as deforestation, land use changes, fires, or even the introduction of new crops or livestock can create ecological vacancies. These openings are often exploited by invasive species that can rapidly take over disturbed or degraded areas. Trade and transportation. Invasive species are often transported unintentionally as stowaways in ships, aircraft, or cargo. They can also be deliberately introduced for ornamental, agricultural, or biological control purposes and then spread beyond intended areas. Biological factors. Some species are inherently more adaptable, resilient, and able to outcompete native species due to characteristics such as rapid reproduction, generalist feeding habits, or the ability to thrive in disturbed environments. These traits make them more successful in invading new habitats. Consequences of biological invasions. Biological invasions can have profound ecological, economic, and social consequences. Some of the key impacts include ecological impacts. Disruption of native communities. Invasive species can outcompete, predate on, or introduce diseases to native species, reducing their populations and altering the balance of the ecosystem. This can lead to the decline or extinction of native species. Habitat modification. Some invasive species modify the physical structure of the habitat in which they live. For example, invasive plants like kudzu or purple loosestrife can alter the composition of plant communities, leading to changes in soil structure, nutrient cycles, and water availability. Changes in food webs. Invasive species can disrupt local food webs by either introducing new predators, prey, or competitors. For instance, invasive species like the zebra mussel can alter aquatic ecosystems by filtering large amounts of plankton and disrupting the food supply for native species. Economic impacts. Agricultural damage. Many invasive species, such as crop pests, e.g., the Colorado potato beetle or the Asian longhorn beetle, can severely damage crops, leading to significant economic losses. Invasive plants can also reduce crop yields by outcompeting agricultural species. Cost of control and management. Governments and organizations spend billions of dollars annually trying to control or eradicate invasive species. This includes the cost of monitoring, research, physical removal, and the restoration of affected habitats. Impact on fisheries and tourism. Invasive species can negatively impact industries like fishing and tourism. For instance, invasive aquatic species like the Asian carp threaten fisheries by outcompeting native species and altering water quality, while the introduction of invasive plants can impact recreational areas and landscapes. Social impacts. Human health. Invasive species can pose direct or indirect risks to human health. Some invasive species, like the tiger mosquito, carry diseases such as dengue or Zika. Others, such as the plant species poison ivy, may cause allergic reactions in humans. Loss of ecosystem services. Ecosystem services such as water purification, soil fertility, carbon sequestration, and pollination can be compromised by invasive species. For example, the introduction of invasive plants can alter the structure of soil and water, making it less suitable for native plants and animals, thus impacting ecosystem functioning. Examples of invasive species. Zebra mussel Dreissena polymorpha. This small freshwater mollusk is native to Eastern Europe but has spread rapidly to North America and other parts of the world. Zebra mussels clog water intake pipes, outcompete native species, and alter food webs in freshwater ecosystems. Kudzu porari montana, originally from Asia. Kudzu is an invasive vine in the United States. It grows rapidly and can smother trees and shrubs, causing significant damage to ecosystems, agricultural lands, and infrastructure. Cane toad Rhinella marina, introduced to Australia to control sugarcane pests. The cane toad has become an invasive species in many ecosystems. It has toxic skin secretions that kill native predators and outcompetes native amphibians. European starling, Sturnus vulgaris, introduced to North America in the 19th century. The European starling has become one of the most successful invasive bird species. It competes with native birds for nesting sites and resources, displacing native species. Emerald ash borer, Agrolis planopennis, native to Asia. This beetle is responsible for the widespread death of ash trees in North America, significantly affecting forest ecosystems and urban landscapes. Management and control of invasive species. Prevention. The best way to manage invasive species is through prevention. This includes regulating international trade, conducting inspections, and restricting the movement of potentially harmful species. Public awareness campaigns can also reduce the likelihood of accidental introductions. Eradication. If invasive species are detected early in an ecosystem, efforts can be made to eradicate them through mechanical removal, chemical treatments, or biological control, introducing natural predators or diseases. Control and containment. In cases where eradication is not possible, the focus shifts to controlling or containing the spread of invasive species. This can involve reducing their population size, restricting their movement, or restoring native habitats to outcompete the invaders. Restoration. Restoration involves reintroducing native species and habitats to recover the ecological balance and ecosystem services lost due to invasions. This is often a long-term process that requires monitoring and active management. Previous year questions with answers. Q. What is the primary cause of biological invasions? Human activity, particularly through trade and transportation, is the primary cause of biological invasions. 2017. Q. Which of the following is an example of an invasive species that has had significant ecological impacts in North America? Zebra mussel, Dreissena polymorpha. 2018. Q. What is the major economic impact of invasive species on agriculture? Invasive species can cause significant crop. Biological invasions. ChatGPT said. Biological invasions. An overview. Biological invasions refer to the process by which species, often non-native or exotic, are introduced into new habitats and spread, resulting in significant ecological, economic, and social impacts. These invasive species can disrupt ecosystems, outcompete native species, alter habitat structures, and lead to long-term environmental changes. Biological invasions have become a significant global issue, contributing to biodiversity loss, altering ecosystem services, and affecting human activities. Definition and causes of biological invasions. Biological invasion occurs when a species is introduced to a new environment, either intentionally or accidentally, where it establishes itself and spreads, often without the natural predators, competitors, or diseases that regulate its population in its native habitat. The factors contributing to biological invasions include human activity, human transportation, trade, and agricultural practices are the primary means by which species are transported to new areas. Globalization, urbanization, and infrastructure development have greatly increased the movement of species, sometimes facilitating their spread. Climate change. Alterations in climate patterns can create favorable conditions for non-native species to thrive, especially in areas where native species are struggling due to changing environmental conditions. Shifts in temperature, precipitation, and seasonality can make ecosystems more susceptible to invasions. Disturbances in ecosystems. Disturbances such as deforestation, land use changes, fires, or even the introduction of new crops or livestock can create ecological vacancies. These openings are often exploited by invasive species that can rapidly take over disturbed or degraded areas. Trade and transportation. Invasive species are often transported unintentionally as stowaways in ships, aircraft, or cargo. They can also be deliberately introduced for ornamental, agricultural, or biological control purposes and then spread beyond intended areas. Biological factors. Some species are inherently more adaptable, resilient, and able to outcompete native species due to characteristics such as rapid reproduction, generalist feeding habits, or the ability to thrive in disturbed environments. These traits make them more successful in invading new habitats. Consequences of biological invasions. Biological invasions can have profound ecological, economic, and social consequences. Some of the key impacts include ecological impacts. Disruption of native communities. Invasive species can outcompete, predate on, or introduce diseases to native species, reducing their populations and altering the balance of the ecosystem. This can lead to the decline or extinction of native species. Habitat modification. Some invasive species modify the physical structure of the habitat in which they live. For example, invasive plants like kudzu or purple loosestrife can alter the composition of plant communities, leading to changes in soil structure, nutrient cycles, and water availability. Changes in food webs. Invasive species can disrupt local food webs by either introducing new predators, prey, or competitors. For instance, invasive species like the zebra mussel can alter aquatic ecosystems by filtering large amounts of plankton and disrupting the food supply for native species. Economic impacts. Agricultural damage. Many invasive species, such as crop pests, e.g., the Colorado potato beetle or the Asian longhorn beetle, can severely damage crops, leading to significant economic losses. Invasive plants can also reduce crop yields by outcompeting agricultural species. Cost of control and management. Governments and organizations spend billions of dollars annually trying to control or eradicate invasive species. This includes the cost of monitoring, research, physical removal, and the restoration of affected habitats. Impact on fisheries and tourism. Invasive species can negatively impact industries like fishing and tourism. For instance, invasive aquatic species like the Asian carp threaten fisheries by outcompeting native species and altering water quality, while the introduction of invasive plants can impact recreational areas and landscapes. Social impacts. Human health. Invasive species can pose direct or indirect risks to human health. Some invasive species, like the tiger mosquito, carry diseases such as dengue or Zika. Others, such as the plant species poison ivy, may cause allergic reactions in humans. Loss of ecosystem services. Ecosystem services such as water purification, soil fertility, carbon sequestration, and pollination can be compromised by invasive species. For example, the introduction of invasive plants can alter the structure of soil and water, making it less suitable for native plants and animals, thus impacting ecosystem functioning. Examples of invasive species. Zebra mussel, Dreissena polymorpha. This small freshwater mollusk is native to Eastern Europe but has spread rapidly to North America and other parts of the world. Zebra mussels clog water intake pipes, outcompete native species, and alter food webs in freshwater ecosystems. Kudzu polaria montana, originally from Asia. Kudzu is an invasive vine in the United States. It grows rapidly and can smother trees and shrubs, causing significant damage to ecosystems, agricultural lands, and infrastructure. Cane toad Rhinella marina, introduced to Australia to control sugarcane pests. The cane toad has become an invasive species in many ecosystems. It has toxic skin secretions that kill native predators and outcompetes native amphibians. European starling, Sturnus vulgaris, introduced to North America in the 19th century. The European starling has become one of the most successful invasive bird species. It competes with native birds for nesting sites and resources, displacing native species. Emerald ash borer, Agaricus planopennis, native to Asia. This beetle is responsible for the widespread death of ash trees in North America, significantly affecting forest ecosystems and urban landscapes. Management and control of invasive species. Prevention. The best way to manage invasive species is through prevention. This includes regulating international trade, conducting inspections, and restricting the movement of potentially harmful species. Public awareness campaigns can also reduce the likelihood of accidental introductions. Eradication. If invasive species are detected early in an ecosystem, efforts can be made to eradicate them through mechanical removal, chemical treatments, or biological control, introducing natural predators or diseases. Control and containment. In cases where eradication is not possible, the focus shifts to controlling or containing the spread of invasive species. This can involve reducing their population size, restricting their movement, or restoring native habitats to outcompete the invaders. Restoration. Restoration involves reintroducing native species and habitats to recover the ecological balance and ecosystem services lost due to invasions. This is often a long-term process that requires monitoring and active management. Previous year questions with answers. Q. What is the primary cause of biological invasions? Human activity, particularly through trade and transportation, is the primary cause of biological invasions. 2017. Q. Which of the following is an example of an invasive species that has had significant ecological impacts in North America? Zebra mussel, Dreissena polymorpha. 2018. Q. What is the major economic impact of invasive species on agriculture? Invasive species can cause significant crop damage, leading to reduced yields and economic losses. 2019. Q. Which of the following species is considered an invasive species in Australia, originally introduced for pest control? Cane toad Rhinella marina. 2020. Q. What is one method commonly used to control invasive species? Biological control, which involves introducing natural predators or diseases to reduce the population of the invasive species. 2021. Q. Which ecological impact is commonly associated with biological invasions? Disruption of native species and habitats, leading to a loss of biodiversity. 2022. Conclusion. Previous year questions with answers. Q. What is the primary cause of biological invasions? Human activity, particularly through trade and transportation, is the primary cause of biological invasions. 2017. Q. Which of the following is an example of an invasive species that has had significant ecological impacts in North America? Zebra mussel, Dreissena polymorpha. 2018. Q. What is the major economic impact of invasive species on agriculture? Invasive species can cause significant crop damage, leading to reduced yields and economic losses. 2019. Q. Which of the following species is considered an invasive species in Australia, originally introduced? Invasive species can cause significant crop damage, leading to reduced yields and economic losses. 2019. Q. Which of the following species is considered an invasive species in Australia, originally introduced for pest control? Cane toad Rhinella marina. 2020. Q. What is one method commonly used to control invasive species? Biological control, which involves introducing natural predators or diseases to reduce the population of the invasive species. 2021. Q. Which ecological impact is commonly associated with biological invasions? Disruption of native species and habitats, leading to a loss of biodiversity. 2022. Conclusion. Biological invasions are a pressing issue that can lead to severe ecological, economic, and social consequences. Effective management, including prevention, eradication, and control, is essential to mitigate the impacts of invasive species. Understanding the mechanisms behind biological invasions and the importance of early detection can help safeguard ecosystems and biodiversity. The previous year questions will aid you in preparing for the UGC NET JRF environmental science exam by emphasizing key areas within the topic of biological invasions. You said. Biodiversity and its conservation. Definition, types, importance of biodiversity and threats to biodiversity. ChatGPT said. Biodiversity and its conservation. Biodiversity, or biological diversity, refers to the variety and variability of life on Earth, encompassing the diversity of genes, species, and ecosystems. It is the foundation of ecosystem services essential to human well-being, including food, clean water, climate regulation, and cultural services. Biodiversity is vital for ecosystem resilience, evolutionary processes, and ecological balance. As human activities continue to alter natural environments at unprecedented scales, the conservation of biodiversity has become an urgent global priority. Definition of biodiversity. Biodiversity is defined as the total variety of life forms on Earth, including their genetic differences, the variety of species, flora and fauna, and the ecosystems they form. The Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, 1992, formally defines biodiversity as a variability among living organisms from all sources, including inter alia, terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems and ecological complexes of which they are part. This includes diversity within species, between species, and ecosystems. Types of biodiversity. Genetic diversity. It refers to the variation of genes within species. This includes the genetic variation within a population and between populations of the same species. It provides the raw material for evolution and adaptation to changing environmental conditions. For instance, genetic diversity among rice or wheat varieties allows breeders to select for drought or pest resistance. Species diversity. This is the diversity of species within a particular region or ecosystem. It includes species richness, the number of species, and species evenness, how evenly individuals are distributed among those species. For example, the Western Ghats and the Indo-Burma region are hotspots of species diversity in India. Ecosystem diversity. It refers to the variety of ecosystems in biodiversity and its conservation. Biodiversity, or biological diversity, refers to the variety and variability of life on Earth, encompassing the diversity of genes, species, and ecosystems. It is the foundation of ecosystem services essential to human well-being, including food, clean water, climate regulation, and cultural services. Biodiversity is vital for ecosystem resilience, evolutionary processes, and ecological balance. As human activities continue to alter natural environments at unprecedented scales, the conservation of biodiversity has become an urgent global priority. Definition of biodiversity. Biodiversity is defined as the total variety of life forms on Earth, including their genetic differences, the variety of species, flora and fauna, and the ecosystems they form. The Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, 1992, formally defines biodiversity as a variability among living organisms from all sources, including inter alia, terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems and the ecological complexes of which they are part. This includes diversity within species, between species, and ecosystems. Types of biodiversity. Genetic diversity. It refers to the variation of genes within species. This includes the genetic variation within a population and between populations of the same species. It provides the raw material for evolution and adaptation to changing environmental conditions. For instance, genetic diversity among rice or wheat varieties allows breeders to select for drought or pest resistance. Species diversity. This is the diversity of species within a particular region or ecosystem. It includes species richness, the number of species, and species evenness, how evenly individuals are distributed among those species. For example, the Western Ghats and the Indo-Burma region are hotspots of species diversity in India. Ecosystem diversity. It refers to the variety of ecosystems in a given place. This includes terrestrial, freshwater, and marine ecosystems such as forests, grasslands, wetlands, coral reefs, and deserts. Each ecosystem supports a complex web of interactions among organisms and with their physical environment. Importance of biodiversity. Ecological stability. Biodiversity enhances ecosystem productivity and stability. Diverse ecosystems are more resilient to disturbances like climate change, disease outbreaks, and invasive species. Provision of ecosystem services. Biodiversity supports vital ecosystem services such as pollination, nutrient cycling, soil formation, air and water purification, and climate regulation. It plays a critical role in sustaining the Earth's life support systems. Food security and agriculture. Genetic diversity in crops and livestock helps ensure food security by providing resistance to pests, diseases, and changing environmental conditions. Many food crops originated from biodiversity-rich regions. Medicinal resources. A significant proportion of pharmaceutical drugs are derived from natural sources. For instance, the antimalarial drug artemisinin is derived from the plant Artemisia annua. Cultural and aesthetic value. Biodiversity is deeply embedded in cultural, spiritual, and recreational practices around the world. Sacred groves in India, for example, are hotspots of biodiversity protected through traditional beliefs. Scientific research and education. Biodiversity provides opportunities for scientific discovery and environmental education. It contributes to understanding ecological interactions, evolutionary biology, and conservation strategies. Threats to biodiversity. Habitat loss and fragmentation. This is the most significant cause of biodiversity loss. Deforestation, urbanization, agricultural expansion, and mining lead to the destruction of natural habitats and fragmentation of populations, increasing extinction risks. Pollution, air, water, and soil pollution from industrial, agricultural, and domestic sources degrade ecosystems and poison wildlife. Eutrophication from excess fertilizers can lead to the death of aquatic species due to oxygen depletion. Climate change, rising temperatures, sea level rise, altered precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events disrupt species life cycles, habitats, and migration patterns. Coral bleaching and the shifting of species ranges are direct outcomes of climate change. Invasive species. Non-native species can outcompete, prey on, or bring diseases to native species, leading to population declines and extinctions. For example, Lantana camara and Icornia crassites are invasive species that threaten native biodiversity in India. Overexploitation, unsustainable hunting, fishing, logging, and harvesting of plant and animal species reduce population sizes and can lead to extinction. For example, the overharvesting of medicinal plants has endangered several species in the Himalayas. Illegal wildlife trade. The global illegal trade in wildlife and animal products threatens many species, including tigers, rhinos, and pangolins, driven by demand for traditional medicine, luxury items, and exotic pets. Previous year questions with answers Q. Which of the following is an example of genetic diversity? A. The presence of different rice varieties such as basmati, IR64, and Swarna. 2018. Q. Biodiversity hotspots are characterized by which of the following? A. High endemism. A. The presence of different rice varieties such as basmati, IR. Previous year questions with answers Q. Which of the following is an example of genetic diversity? A. The presence of different rice varieties such as basmati, IR64, and Swarna. 2018. Q. Biodiversity hotspots are characterized by which of the following? A. High endemism and high species richness. 2019. Q. Which of the following is a major cause of habitat loss in tropical forests? A. Conversion of forests into agricultural land. 2020. Q. Which of the following statements about biodiversity is correct? A. Ecosystem diversity includes various types of ecosystems such as forests, wetlands, and coral reefs. 2021. Q. The plant Rauwolfia serpentina, which is used in treating hypertension, is an example of biodiversity's role in medicinal resources. 2022. Q. Invasive species such as Icornia crassites affect aquatic biodiversity by reducing oxygen availability and blocking sunlight. 2023. Conclusion. Biodiversity forms the backbone of ecological integrity and human survival. Its conservation is vital not only for protecting the vast array of life on Earth but also for sustaining human societies that depend on natural systems. Protecting biodiversity requires a multi-pronged approach involving habitat preservation, pollution control, climate change mitigation, and awareness building. With rapid biodiversity loss underway, urgent and collective action is essential to ensure ecological sustainability for future generations. You said. Concept and basis of identification of hotspots. Hotspots in India. ChatGPT said. Hotspots of biodiversity. Concept, basis of identification, and hotspots in India. UGC NET JRF Environmental Science. High-level detailed lecture. The concept of biodiversity. Hotspots represents one of the most significant global strategies for prioritizing regions for conservation. These are areas rich in endemic species but facing extreme threats of habitat loss and degradation. The idea was first introduced by British ecologist Norman Myers in 1988 and later expanded by Conservation International. The notion of hotspots is central to conservation biology, especially in countries like India, where high biodiversity coexists with intense human pressure. Concept of biodiversity hotspots. A A biodiversity hotspot is a biogeographic region that is both rich in endemic species found nowhere else on Earth, and highly threatened by human activities. These regions are often centers of high ecological interaction, evolution, and endemism. The underlying philosophy of the hotspot approach is to focus conservation efforts on areas where the biological value is high and the threats are severe, thereby ensuring the most efficient allocation of resources. Hotspots are not only defined by the number of species but by the uniqueness of their species and the urgency for conservation due to habitat destruction. Conservation efforts in these regions are vital because once these species-rich areas are degraded, the loss of unique life forms is often irreversible. Basis of identification of hotspots. Biodiversity hotspots are identified based on the following two stringent criteria. High endemism. The region must have at least 1,500 species of vascular plants as endemics, plants that are found nowhere else in the world. This ensures that the area supports unique biodiversity that cannot be protected elsewhere. Significant habitat loss. The region must have lost at least 70% of its original natural vegetation, i.e., it must be under high threat from anthropogenic activities such as deforestation, agriculture, mining, and urban expansion. This indicates that the region is highly vulnerable and requires immediate conservation measures. As of now, 36 biodiversity hotspots have been identified globally, covering just 2.3% of Earth's land surface but housing more than 50% of the world's endemic plant species and many endemic animals. This illustrates the importance of conserving even small fractions of Earth's land for safeguarding global biodiversity. Biodiversity hotspots in India. As of now, 36 biodiversity hotspots have been identified globally, covering just 2.3% of Earth's land surface but housing more than 50% of the world's endemic plant species and many endemic animals. This illustrates the importance of conserving even small fractions of Earth's land for safeguarding global biodiversity. Biodiversity hotspots in India. India, a megadiverse country, is home to 4 globally recognized biodiversity hotspots, all of which fulfill the criteria of high endemism and high threat level. The Himalaya hotspot. This hotspot includes the entire Indian Himalayan region, spanning Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, and parts of North Bengal and parts of neighboring countries like Bhutan, Nepal, and Myanmar. It harbors immense altitudinal and climatic variation, supporting unique flora and fauna. Iconic species include the snow leopard, red panda, and Himalayan monal. Indo-Burma hotspot. Covering the northeastern Indian states, excluding the Himalayas, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and parts of southern China, this region is one of the most threatened hotspots. It includes the eastern Himalayas, Brahmaputra Valley, and the hill ranges of the northeast. Endemic species such as the hulak gibbon, golden langur, and diverse orchids are found here. Extensive deforestation and shifting cultivation are the major threats. Western Ghats and Sri Lanka hotspot. Extending from Maharashtra to Kerala and including the Nilgiris, Annamalai, and Pilani hills, the Western Ghats are among the most biologically rich and well-studied areas in India. With high levels of endemism in amphibians, reptiles, and flowering plants, this hotspot is known for species like the lion-tailed macaque, Malabar civet, and numerous endemic frogs and trees. Tea, coffee, and rubber plantations, coupled with habitat fragmentation, are serious conservation concerns. Sundaland, Nicobar Islands part in India. The Nicobar Islands form a part of the broader Sundaland hotspot that includes the Malay Peninsula, Borneo, Java, and Sumatra. These islands host several endemic species such as the Nicobar negapo and Nicobar tree shrew. Being insular ecosystems, they are vulnerable to sea level rise, invasive species, and unsustainable tourism. Each of these hotspots is not just a repository of species richness but also a genetic and ecosystem diversity, deeply interlinked with local cultures and traditions. India's Biological Diversity Act 2002 and the establishment of Biodiversity Management Committees (BMCs) and People's Biodiversity Registers (PBRs) are part of national efforts to conserve these valuable regions. Previous year questions with answers Q. What are the 2 criteria used to define biodiversity hotspots? A. Presence of at least 1,500 endemic plant species and loss of at least 70% of original habitat. UGC-NET 2017. Q. Which of the following is not a biodiversity hotspot in India? A. Thar Desert. Correct answer. As Thar is not a designated hotspot. UGC-NET 2018. Q. The Western Ghats are included in global biodiversity hotspots because of A. High endemism and habitat loss. UGC-NET 2019. Q. Which Indian region is part of the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot? A. Northeast India. UGC-NET 2020. Q. Which of the following biodiversity hotspots include the Nicobar Islands? A. Sundaland. UGC-NET 2022. Q. The Himalaya biodiversity hotspot includes A. Parts of India, Nepal, Bhutan, and southern China. UGC-NET 2023. Conclusion. Biodiversity hotspots are critical ecological units where conservation efforts yield the highest impact due to the rich yet threatened nature of life forms. The identification and preservation of these hotspots is a cornerstone of both global and national biodiversity strategies. India's 4 biodiversity hotspots are not only home to unique species and ecosystems but are also culturally significant and ecologically indispensable. Protecting them is essential for maintaining ecological balance, climate resilience, and sustainable development. Conservation in these regions must integrate traditional knowledge, legal frameworks, scientific research, and public participation to ensure a secure ecological future. You said. Measures of biodiversity. Strategies for biodiversity conservation. ChatGPT said. Measures of biodiversity and strategies for biodiversity conservation. UGC-NET JRF Environmental Science. Complete. High detail. Exam level lecture based on previous year question areas. Biodiversity, or biological diversity, refers to the variety and variability of life forms on Earth, encompassing diversity within species, between species, and among ecosystems. It is a key indicator of ecosystem health and resilience. Accurate measurement and effective conservation of biodiversity are central themes in environmental science and essential to achieving sustainable development. This lecture covers a detailed scientific basis for measuring biodiversity and elaborates on comprehensive conservation strategies relevant to UGC-NET JRF level understanding. Measures of biodiversity. Biodiversity can be assessed at 3 main levels: genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Each of these levels provides different insights into the structure, function, and health of biological systems. Various qualitative and quantitative methods have been developed to measure biodiversity, especially at the species level. Alpha diversity within habitat diversity. This refers to the number of species within a particular area, community, or ecosystem. It is a measure of species richness and can also account for evenness, how evenly individuals are distributed among species. Common indices used include species richness, total number of species in a given sample. Shannon-Wiener index H considers both richness and evenness. Simpson's index D measures the probability that 2 individuals randomly selected belong to the same species. Beta diversity between habitat diversity. Beta diversity represents the difference in species composition between 2 or more ecosystems. It indicates species turnover across environmental gradients or spatial scales. It is calculated using the Whittaker index or Jaccard similarity coefficient. Gamma diversity, landscape level diversity. This measures the total species richness across a large geographic. Alpha diversity within habitat diversity. This refers to the measures of biodiversity. Biodiversity can be assessed at 3 main levels: genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Each of these levels provides different insights into the structure, function, and health of biological systems. Various qualitative and quantitative methods have been developed to measure biodiversity, especially at the species level. Alpha diversity within habitat diversity. This refers to the number of species within a particular area, community, or ecosystem. It is a measure of species richness and can also account for evenness, how evenly individuals are distributed among species. Common indices used include species richness, total number of species in a given sample. Shannon-Wiener index H considers both richness and evenness. Simpson's index D measures the probability that 2 individuals randomly selected belong to the same species. Beta diversity between habitat diversity. Beta diversity represents the difference in species composition between 2 or more ecosystems. It indicates species turnover across environmental gradients or spatial scales. It is calculated using the Whittaker index or Jaccard similarity coefficient. Gamma diversity, landscape level diversity. This measures the total species richness across a large geographic area or landscape that includes multiple ecosystems. Gamma diversity integrates both alpha and beta diversities and is critical in large-scale conservation planning. Genetic diversity. Genetic variation within populations of a species determines their adaptability to environmental changes. It is measured using molecular markers such as microsatellites, RAPD, AFLP, and DNA sequencing techniques. Ecosystem diversity. This includes the variety of ecosystems in a region. Metrics for ecosystem diversity involve classification of different habitat types, their structural complexity, functions, and interactions. Functional diversity. This refers to the range of functional traits of organisms that influence ecosystem processes. It is especially useful for assessing the impact of biodiversity loss on ecosystem functions. Strategies for biodiversity conservation. Biodiversity conservation involves preserving the variety of species, their habitats, and genetic diversity, and ensuring the sustainable use of biological resources. The conservation strategies can be broadly classified into in situ and ex situ methods, along with legal, institutional, and participatory approaches. 1. In situ conservation. This method focuses on the conservation of species in their natural habitats. It allows the protection of not just individual species but entire ecosystems. Major in situ strategies include protected areas. These include national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and biosphere reserves where human activity is limited to ensure species protection. For example, Jim Corbett National Park for tigers, Silent Valley National Park for tropical evergreen forests. Biosphere reserves. These are large areas aimed at conserving the diversity and integrity of plants, animals, and microorganisms. They also serve to support sustainable use by local communities. Examples in India include Nilgiri and Sundarbans biosphere reserves. Sacred groves. These are traditionally protected forest patches conserved by local communities for religious and cultural reasons. Found extensively in the Western Ghats and Northeast India, they are rich in endemic and threatened species. Conservation of keystone and flagship species. Keystone species like elephants and flagship species like tigers are conserved to maintain ecosystem balance and generate public support. 2. Ex situ conservation. This involves conservation outside the natural habitat. It is used when species are critically endangered or their habitats are destroyed. Key approaches include botanical gardens and zoological parks. These house and breed friend species under human supervision. Seed banks and gene banks. These store seeds and genetic material at controlled temperatures, like National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources (NBPGR) in India. Cryopreservation and tissue culture. Advanced biotechnology techniques help in the long-term storage and regeneration of plant and animal tissues, embryos, or gametes. Captive breeding and reintroduction programs. Species are bred in captivity and released into the wild to rebuild populations. For example, the Project Crocodile and Project Congo. 3. Legal and policy frameworks. Biological Diversity Act 2002, India's comprehensive law for biodiversity conservation, aligned with the Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD). Wildlife Protection Act 1972 provides legal protection to endangered flora and fauna through schedules and protected areas. Environment Protection Act 1986, an umbrella legislation for environmental protection, including biodiversity. National Biodiversity Authority (NBA). It regulates access to biological resources and associated knowledge and ensures fair benefit sharing. 4. Community-based and participatory conservation. Joint Forest Management (JFM), a participatory model involving forest departments and local communities for sustainable forest use and protection. People's Biodiversity Registers (PBRs) maintain traditional knowledge and biodiversity records at village levels. Eco-development programs reduce the dependency of local communities on forest resources by providing alternative livelihoods. Previous year questions with answers. Q. The Shannon Wiener Index is used to measure species diversity in a community. UGC NET 2016. Q. Which of the following is an example of in situ conservation? National Park. UGC NET 2017. Q. Ex situ conservation includes gene banks and zoological parks. UGC NET 2019. Q. Which act in India is specifically enacted for biodiversity conservation? Previous year questions with answers. Q. The Shannon Wiener Index is used to measure species diversity in a community. UGC NET 2016. Q. Which of the following is an example of in situ conservation? National Park. UGC NET 2017. Q. Ex situ conservation includes gene banks and zoological parks. UGC NET 2019. Q. Which act in India is specifically enacted for biodiversity conservation? Biological Diversity Act 2002. UGC NET 2020. Q. Sacred groves are best examples of in situ conservation managed by local communities. UGC NET 2021. Q. The concept of gamma diversity refers to total species richness in a landscape including multiple ecosystems. UGC NET 2023. Conclusion. Biodiversity conservation is an intricate and multi-layered field involving precise assessment of biological variation and strategic interventions to preserve it. Accurate measures of biodiversity such as alpha, beta, and gamma diversities, along with genetic and functional metrics, are foundational for informed conservation actions. India has implemented a diverse range of strategies through protected areas, legal acts, biotechnology, and community participation to safeguard its immense biological wealth. For aspirants of UGC NET JRF Environmental Science, mastery over both measurement techniques and conservation strategies, backed by recent question patterns, is essential to succeed in the exam and contribute meaningfully to sustainable ecological stewardship. You said. In situ, ex situ, and in vitro conservation. ChatGPT said. In situ, ex situ, and in vitro conservation. UGC NET JRF Environmental Science, advanced, high quality, full-length lecture based on previous year questions. Conservation biology focuses on maintaining biodiversity and ecosystem stability in the face of increasing anthropogenic threats. Biodiversity can be conserved through multiple strategies depending on the ecological status of species, urgency, habitat condition, and technological feasibility. The three major approaches are in situ, ex situ, and in vitro conservation. Each method plays a critical role in sustaining genetic resources and ecological balance. For UGC NET JRF Environmental Science, detailed knowledge of these conservation types, their mechanisms, advantages, limitations, and real-world applications is crucial, as questions frequently appear from this topic. 1. In situ conservation. In situ conservation refers to the conservation of ecosystems and natural habitats, and the maintenance and recovery of viable populations of species in their natural surroundings. It ensures the protection of biodiversity in its original ecosystem, enabling natural evolutionary processes, genetic flow, and species interactions. Key components. Protected areas. The primary mode of in situ conservation includes national parks, strictly protected areas for the conservation of ecosystems and species, e.g., Kaziranga for one-horned rhinoceros. Wildlife sanctuaries. Areas that permit some human activities but prioritize species protection, e.g., Periyar Wildlife Sanctuary. Biosphere reserves. Large areas encompassing core, strict protection buffer, limited activity, and transition zones, sustainable human involvement, e.g., Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. Sacred groves. Patches of forest preserved by local traditions and religious beliefs, rich in endemic and rare species, e.g., Khasi Hills of Meghalaya. Community reserves and conservation reserves, introduced under the Wildlife Protection Amendment Act 2002 to empower local communities in conservation efforts. Advantages. Maintains ecological integrity and evolutionary processes. Conservation biology focuses on maintaining biodiversity and ecosystem stability in the face of increasing anthropogenic threats. Biodiversity can be conserved through multiple strategies depending on the ecological status of species, urgency, habitat condition, and technological feasibility. The three major approaches are in situ, ex situ, and in vitro conservation. Each method plays a critical role in sustaining genetic resources and ecological balance. For UGC NET JRF Environmental Science, detailed knowledge of these conservation types, their mechanisms, advantages, limitations, and real-world applications is crucial, as questions frequently appear from this topic. 1. In situ conservation. In situ conservation refers to the conservation of ecosystems and natural habitats, and the maintenance and recovery of viable populations of species in their natural surroundings. It ensures the protection of biodiversity in its original ecosystem, enabling natural evolutionary processes, genetic flow, and species interactions. Key components. Protected areas. The primary mode of in situ conservation includes national parks, strictly protected areas for the conservation of ecosystems and species, e.g., Kaziranga for one-horned rhinoceros. Wildlife sanctuaries. Areas that permit some human activities but prioritize species protection, e.g., Periyar Wildlife Sanctuary. Biosphere reserves. Large areas encompassing core, strict protection buffer, limited activity, and transition zones, sustainable human involvement, e.g., Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. Sacred groves, patches of forest preserved by local traditions and religious beliefs, rich in endemic and rare species, e.g., Khasi Hills of Meghalaya. Community reserves and conservation reserves, introduced under the Wildlife Protection Amendment Act, 2002 to empower local communities in conservation efforts. Advantages. Maintains ecological integrity and evolutionary processes. Conserves biodiversity at ecosystem, species, and genetic levels. Promotes sustainable development through ecotourism and local involvement. Limitations. Requires large, undisturbed habitats. Vulnerable to natural disasters, poaching, deforestation, and land use conflicts. 2. Ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation involves the preservation of components of biological diversity outside their natural habitats. It is particularly crucial for critically endangered species, those with extremely small populations, or species that are no longer viable in the wild. Key facilities and techniques. Botanical gardens and zoological parks preserve plant and animal species under human supervision, enabling public awareness and education, e.g., Indian Botanical Garden in Kolkata. Gene banks and seed banks store seeds, tissues, and genetic material under controlled conditions for long-term conservation, e.g., National Gene Bank at NBPGR, New Delhi. Cryopreservation, ultra-low temperature storage of cells, embryos, gametes, and DNA using liquid nitrogen, -196 degrees Celsius, effective for species with recalcitrant seeds or vegetative propagation. Captive breeding programs, breeding of endangered animals under controlled conditions to increase population and reintroduce them into wild habitats, e.g., Project Crocodile, lion-tailed macaque conservation. Field gene banks, collections of live plant material, e.g., fruit trees, perennials maintained in fields or gardens. Advantages. Effective for species with severely declining populations. Ensures protection from predators, climate change, and disease outbreaks. Useful for research, public awareness, and potential reintroduction. Limitations. High operational cost and technical expertise required. May result in loss of natural behaviors or genetic adaptations to artificial conditions. Not suitable for all species due to habitat specificity or complex life cycles. 3. In vitro conservation. In vitro conservation is a specialized form of ex situ conservation that uses biotechnology to conserve plant or animal tissues, cells, or embryos in sterile, controlled laboratory environments. It is especially valuable for preserving genetic diversity of rare, endangered, or threatened plant species. Major techniques. Micropropagation, clonal propagation of plants through tissue culture, widely used for multiplying elite genotypes of threatened plant species. Embryo rescue and culture, helps recover embryos from incompatible crosses or endangered species. Pollen and ovule culture, preserves male and female gametes, useful in breeding programs. Synthetic seeds, encapsulation of somatic embryos in a gel-like substance for easy handling, storage, and sewing. Slow growth storage, reduces metabolic activity using low temperatures and osmotic agents, extending the interval between subcultures. Cryopreservation of cell lines, similar to ex situ cryogenic storage, but applied to plant cells, tissues, or meristems. Advantages. Enables preservation of plants with recalcitrant seeds or vegetative propagation. Ideal for long-term conservation of genetic resources with minimal space. Facilitates precise genetic manipulations and restoration. Limitations. Restricted to species where tissue culture protocols are well established. Requires advanced infrastructure, expertise, and aseptic conditions. Comparative summary. In situ ensures natural evolutionary dynamics and community interactions but may fail under extreme threats. Ex situ offers artificial protection and controlled breeding but may lose ecological authenticity. In vitro supports long-term genetic conservation and biotechnological interventions but is largely lab-based. Previous year questions with answers. Q. Which of the following is an example of ex situ conservation? A. Gene Bank, UGC NET 2017. Q. Sacred groves are an example of A. In situ conservation, UGC NET 2020. Q. Which technique is used in vitro conservation of plant species? A. Micropropagation, UGC NET 2021. Q. Which of the following strategies is best suited for conserving endemic and habitat-specific species? A. In situ conservation, UGC NET 2019. Q. Which method allows storage of germplasm at ultra-low temperatures? A. Cryopreservation, UGC NET 2022. Q. Which one of the following conservation methods requires artificial and controlled environments? A. Ex situ conservation, UGC NET 2023. Conclusion. Understanding the distinctions and synergies between in situ, ex situ, and in vitro conservation is critical for biodiversity management. In situ conservation maintains species in their ecological context. Ex situ ensures backup in the face of habitat loss, and in vitro provides high-tech support for long-term genetic preservation. An integrated conservation strategy employing all three approaches is essential in the Anthropocene era where biodiversity is under unprecedented stress. For UGC NET JRF aspirants, detailed comprehension and application-based clarity on these conservation modes is vital to score high and support ecological resilience in future environmental careers. You said, National Parks, ChatGPT said, National Parks. UGC NET JRF Environmental Science, high-level lecture with maximum word limit, paragraph format, based on previous year questions and key areas. National parks are one of the most important categories of in situ biodiversity conservation areas recognized globally. They are legally designated and strictly protected natural spaces aimed at preserving the ecological integrity of ecosystems, conserving flora and fauna, and maintaining the natural evolutionary processes without significant human interference. In India, national parks are governed under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, which defines a national park as an area declared by the state government as being of ecological, faunal, floral, geomorphological, or zoological significance for the purpose of protecting, propagating, or developing wildlife or its environment. Unlike wildlife sanctuaries, where limited human activities may be permitted, national parks have stricter restrictions: no grazing, no private ownership of land, and only non-exploitative tourism or research are allowed under tightly controlled conditions. The selection criteria for national parks are based on the uniqueness of ecosystems, presence of endangered species, and the need to preserve ecological balance in a representative biome. The boundaries of national parks are fixed and cannot be altered without legislative approval. Once an area is declared as a national park, the government prohibits all kinds of activities like hunting, forestry operations, or encroachments within its jurisdiction. National parks play a crucial role in the conservation of flagship and keystone species such as the Bengal tiger, Asiatic lion, elephant, rhinoceros, and endemic plants. Furthermore, they serve as centers of scientific research, ecological monitoring, environmental education, and ecotourism that boosts local economies and raises conservation awareness. India currently has over 100 national parks, covering more than 1.2% of its geographical area. Some of the most prominent examples include Jim Corbett National Park, Uttarakhand, the first national park in India established in 1936, Kaziranga National Park, Assam famous for the one-horned rhinoceros, Gir National Park, Gujarat, the last refuge of the Asiatic lion, and Sundarbans National Park, West Bengal, a UNESCO World Heritage Site housing the Royal Bengal tiger and a mangrove ecosystem. Many of these are also part of larger tiger reserves under Project Tiger, which aims at ensuring the survival of this apex predator. National parks also act as carbon sinks, climate stabilizers, and water sources by protecting forests and catchment areas. However, they face serious challenges including encroachment, tourism-related pressures, habitat fragmentation, and climate change. Human-wildlife conflict is a growing concern in areas surrounding national parks, often leading to local resentment. Therefore, effective park management requires community participation, scientific planning, buffer zone development, and ecosystem-based conservation models. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change (MoFCC) and state forest departments are responsible for managing these parks, often with support from NGOs and international conservation bodies. For UGC NET JRF Environmental Science, understanding national parks is vital, not only as ecological spaces but also as indicators of a nation's conservation commitment. The concept, legal framework, examples, ecological importance, and management challenges of national parks must be deeply understood and well articulated during the exam. Previous year questions with answers. Q. Which of the following is India's first national park? A. Jim Corbett National Park, UGC NET 2018. Q. Which of the following statements about national parks is true? A. Grazing is not allowed in national parks, UGC NET 2020. Q. Sundarbans National Park is known for which of the following species? A. Royal Bengal tiger, UGC NET 2021. Q. In India, the authority to notify a national park lies with A. State government, UGC NET 2017. Q. Which of the following national parks is located in a mangrove ecosystem? A. Sundarbans National Park, UGC NET 2022. Q. Which national park is home to the Asiatic lion? A. Gir National Park, UGC NET 2019. Conclusion. National parks are pillars of in situ conservation and play a central role in maintaining ecological stability and genetic diversity. Their significance goes beyond just wildlife protection. They represent humanity's ethical responsibility towards nature and future generations. A comprehensive grasp of their legal framework, ecological role, species composition, and management challenges is essential for cracking UGC net JRF environmental science and for contributing meaningfully to conservation science and policymaking. You said, sanctuaries, ChatGPT said, wildlife sanctuaries. UGC net JRF environmental science, high-level lecture with maximum word limit, paragraph format, based on previous year questions in key areas. Wildlife sanctuaries are crucial components of in situ conservation efforts aimed at protecting specific species and their habitats from degradation and extinction. A wildlife sanctuary is an area declared by the government to protect the flora and fauna of a region, but unlike national parks, wildlife sanctuaries allow for human activities such as grazing, traditional farming, and local resource use, as long as they do not compromise the ecological integrity of the area. They are designated under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 in India, and their primary objective is to safeguard endangered or vulnerable species and maintain biological diversity while supporting ecosystem services. Sanctuaries vary in size, ecological importance, and management practices, and they provide a more flexible conservation model compared to national parks. The key distinction is that, within a sanctuary, certain human activities may be permitted, provided they do not affect the protected species or their habitat. This includes grazing by local communities, which is sometimes vital for the survival of certain grassland species, or controlled harvesting of non-timber forest products (NTFPs). However, commercial exploitation, like logging, hunting, national parks are pillars of in situ conservation and play a central role in maintaining ecological stability and genetic diversity. Their significance goes beyond just wildlife protection. They represent humanity's ethical responsibility towards nature and future generations. A comprehensive grasp of their legal framework, ecological role, species composition, and management challenges is essential for cracking UGC net JRF environmental science and for contributing meaningfully to conservation science and policymaking. You said, sanctuaries, ChatGPT said, wildlife sanctuaries. UGC net JRF environmental science, high-level lecture with maximum word limit, paragraph format, based on previous year questions in key areas. Wildlife sanctuaries are crucial components of in situ conservation efforts aimed at protecting specific species and their habitats from degradation and extinction. A wildlife sanctuary is an area declared by the government to protect the flora and fauna of a region, but unlike national parks, wildlife sanctuaries allow for human activities such as grazing, traditional farming, and local resource use, as long as they do not compromise the ecological integrity of the area. They are designated under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 in India, and their primary objective is to safeguard endangered or vulnerable species and maintain biological diversity while supporting ecosystem services. Sanctuaries vary in size, ecological importance, and management practices, and they provide a more flexible conservation model compared to national parks. The key distinction is that, within a sanctuary, certain human activities may be permitted, provided they do not affect the protected species or their habitat. This includes grazing by local communities, which is sometimes vital for the survival of certain grassland species, or controlled harvesting of non-timber forest products (NTFPs). However, commercial exploitation, like logging, hunting, and mining, is strictly prohibited in sanctuaries. India has established over 500 wildlife sanctuaries, and these sanctuaries play a pivotal role in species conservation. Some notable examples include the Kaladeo National Park, Bharatpur Wildlife Sanctuary in Rajasthan, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, renowned for its bird life, including migratory waterfowl. Manas Wildlife Sanctuary in Assam, a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, is known for its rich biodiversity, including the endangered Assam roof turtle and the pygmy hog. Dandeli Wildlife Sanctuary in Karnataka is another important site for tiger and elephant conservation. Sanctuaries may house diverse ecosystems, ranging from tropical rainforests to dry deciduous forests, wetlands, grasslands, and marine environments. One of the key features of sanctuaries is their role in safeguarding flagship species, such as tigers, elephants, rhinoceros, and leopards. They also provide refuge for plant species with medicinal or ecological significance. Sanctuaries often act as buffer zones for the more strictly managed national parks and can be considered as preparatory areas for species recovery before their reintroduction into the wild. Wildlife sanctuaries contribute significantly to ecological services, such as carbon sequestration, water purification, and soil stabilization. They support local livelihoods through ecotourism, where visitors can experience wildlife in its natural setting. These areas also serve as research zones for biologists and conservationists studying ecosystem dynamics, species interactions, and behavior. Challenges in wildlife sanctuary management. Human-wildlife conflict. In regions where local human populations rely on natural resources for livelihood, conflicts arise when wildlife, particularly large animals like elephants and tigers, invade agricultural lands or settlements. This can lead to harm to both humans and animals, complicating conservation efforts. Encroachment. Despite legal protections, land encroachment for agriculture, settlement, and infrastructure development remains a significant challenge. Poor enforcement of laws and lack of alternative livelihoods for local communities exacerbate this issue. Poaching and illegal trade. Wildlife sanctuaries often face threats from poaching, particularly for endangered species like tigers, rhinoceros, and other high-value animals. Illegal timber extraction and the collection of medicinal plants can further degrade sanctuary habitats. Fragmentation. Habitat fragmentation due to urbanization, mining, or infrastructure development disrupts wildlife corridors and makes it difficult for species to migrate, leading to population isolation and genetic bottlenecks. Invasive species. The introduction of non-native species in sanctuaries can disrupt the natural balance, leading to the decline of native species. Managing these invasions requires constant monitoring and intervention. Previous year questions with answers. Q. Which of the following statements about wildlife sanctuaries is correct? A. Human activities like grazing and collection of non-timber forest products are allowed under certain conditions. UGC NET 2020. Q. In which of the following sanctuaries would you expect to find the population of the pygmy hog? A. Manas Wildlife Sanctuary. UGC NET. Q. Which of the following statements about wildlife sanctuaries is correct? A. Human activities like grazing and collection of non-timber forest products are allowed under certain conditions. UGC NET 2020. Q. In which of the following sanctuaries would you expect to find the population of the pygmy hog? A. Manas Wildlife Sanctuary. UGC NET 2019. Q. The main objective of a wildlife sanctuary is to a. Protect species and maintain biodiversity by restricting harmful human activities. UGC NET 2021. Q. Which wildlife sanctuary is famous for its bird life, including migratory waterfowl? A. Kaladeo National Park, Bharatpur Wildlife Sanctuary. UGC NET 2018. Q. Which one of the following is a major challenge in managing wildlife sanctuaries? A. Human-wildlife conflict. UGC NET 2022. Q. Which of the following is true about wildlife sanctuaries? A. They allow sustainable traditional activity. Q. Which of the following statements about wildlife sanctuaries is correct? A. Human activities like grazing and collection of non-timber forest products are allowed under certain conditions. UGC NET 2020. Q. In which of the following sanctuaries would you expect to find the population of the pygmy hog? A. Manas Wildlife Sanctuary. UGC NET 2019. Q. The main objective of a wildlife sanctuary is to a. Protect species and maintain biodiversity by restricting harmful human. Q. In which of the following sanctuary? Q. Which of the following statements about wildlife sanctuaries is correct? A. Human activities like grazing and collection of non-timber forest products are allowed under certain conditions. UGC NET 2020. Q. In which of the following sanctuaries would you expect to find the population of the pygmy hog? A. Manas Wildlife Sanctuary. A. Manas Wildlife Sanctuary. UGC NET 2019. Q. The main objective of a wildlife sanctuary is to a. Protect species and maintain biodiversity by restricting harmful human activities. UGC NET 2021. Q. Which wildlife sanctuary is famous for its bird life, including migratory waterfowl? A. Kaladeo National Park, Bharatpur Wildlife Sanctuary. UGC NET 2018. Q. Which one of the following is a Q. Which wildlife sanctuary is famous for its bird life, including migratory waterfowl? A. Kaladeo National Park, Bharatpur Wildlife Sanctuary. UGC NET 2018. Q. Which one of the following is a major challenge in managing wildlife sanctuaries? A. Human-wildlife conflict. UGC NET 2022. Q. Which of the following is true about wildlife sanctuaries? A. They allow sustainable traditional activities but prohibit commercial exploitation like hunting or logging. UGC NET 2021. Conclusion. Wildlife sanctuaries are integral to the conservation strategy of any nation. They provide essential protection to species and habitats while balancing human interests and ecological integrity. Unlike national parks, they offer a more flexible management model, which allows for human activities in harmony with conservation. Understanding the legal framework, ecological role, challenges, and management of wildlife sanctuaries is essential for those preparing for competitive exams like UGC NetJR of Environmental Science, as it provides crucial insights into biodiversity conservation practices. By thoroughly understanding the concept and management of wildlife sanctuaries, aspirants can apply this knowledge effectively in the exam. You said. Protected areas and sacred groves in India. ChatGPT said. Protected areas and sacred groves in India. UGC NetJR of Environmental Science. High-level lecture with maximum word limit. Paragraph format based on previous year questions and key areas. Protected areas in India. Protected areas are a critical element of conservation strategies aimed at safeguarding biodiversity, ecosystems, and natural habitats in India. These areas are designated and managed by government authorities to ensure the preservation of ecosystems, rare and endangered species, and the integrity of natural resources. The Indian system of protected areas includes national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, conservation reserves, and community reserves, all of which have specific legal protections under the Wildlife Protection Act, 1972. The concept of protected areas is based on the idea that these regions must be preserved in their natural state to prevent the loss of biodiversity and to sustain ecological processes that benefit the entire environment. In India, these areas are managed by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change (MoFCC) and state forest departments. India is home to over 1,600 protected areas, covering more than 5% of the country's geographical area, which is still below the global target of 17% for terrestrial ecosystems as recommended by the Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD). Types of protected areas. National parks, areas designated for the preservation of wildlife and biodiversity where human interference is highly restricted. Activities such as grazing, mining, and logging are prohibited. National parks are established under the Wildlife Protection Act, 1972, and they serve as biodiversity hotspots, scientific research centers, and ecotourism destinations. Wildlife sanctuaries. Unlike national parks, wildlife sanctuaries allow some human activities such as grazing and collection of non-timber forest products (NTFPs) under regulated conditions. However, hunting, poaching, and commercial logging are strictly prohibited. Sanctuaries are designed to protect species, particularly those that are threatened or endangered. Conservation reserves. These are areas designated to protect biodiversity and cultural heritage where human activities like grazing, agriculture, and forest produce collection are permitted under strict conditions. These reserves allow for the active participation of local communities in conservation efforts. Community reserves. These are similar to conservation reserves but are managed with the participation of local communities. The primary aim is to engage the local population in conservation while allowing sustainable resource use. Sacred groves in India. Sacred groves are patches of forest that are protected by local communities due to their religious and cultural significance. They are usually associated with specific deities or spirits and are considered sacred places where the local community performs rituals, prayers, and ceremonies to honor these deities. Sacred groves are found across India, especially in regions with strong traditional or indigenous belief systems. These forests are rich in biodiversity and often house rare, endemic, and endangered species of plants and animals. The protection of these areas is rooted in traditional ecological knowledge and cultural practices. The sacredness of these groves often leads to the strict prohibition of activities such as logging, hunting, and grazing, making them important hotspots for conservation. The concept of sacred groves transcends religious boundaries, with different communities across India maintaining these spaces as part of their belief systems. For example, the Kailasanathar Temple Sacred Grove in Tamil Nadu is dedicated to Lord Shiva, and the Santoshi Mata Sacred Grove in Rajasthan is revered by the local communities. Similarly, the Sarunath Sacred Grove in Uttar Pradesh is associated with local deities. The role of sacred groves in biodiversity conservation is highly significant. These groves serve as refuges for a variety of species, especially plants, which may be endemic or rare. Similarly, the Sarunath Sacred Grove in Uttar Pradesh is associated with local deities. The role of sacred groves in biodiversity conservation is highly significant. These groves serve as refuges for a variety of species, especially plants, which may be endemic or rare. The isolation and protection of sacred groves from human disturbance help in the preservation of flora and fauna, including medicinal plants and other culturally important species. Importance of sacred groves. Biodiversity conservation. Sacred groves act as reservoirs of biodiversity, conserving species that may not be found elsewhere. These groves often host rare and endangered species of plants, animals, and fungi. Cultural and spiritual significance. Sacred groves are central to the spiritual and cultural lives of the local communities. They serve as places for rituals, festivals, and celebrations, promoting a sense of community and identity. Sustainable resource use. Many sacred groves are managed using traditional knowledge systems that focus on sustainable resource use. Local communities rely on these resources in ways that do not degrade the environment. Climate regulation. Sacred groves help regulate local climates, protect watersheds, and prevent soil erosion, contributing to ecological balance in surrounding areas. Threats to sacred groves. Despite their cultural significance, sacred groves face numerous challenges, including encroachment, deforestation, loss of traditional knowledge, and climate change. The decline in sacred groves is a significant concern as urbanization and industrialization increase. The preservation of sacred groves depends on strengthening community-based conservation, legal protections, and integrating sacred groves into broader conservation policies. Previous year questions with answers. Q. What is the primary difference between a national park and a wildlife sanctuary in India? National parks have stricter regulations and do not allow any human activity, while wildlife sanctuaries may allow some human activities such as grazing under regulated conditions. UGC NET 2020. Q. Which of the following is a major role of sacred groves in India? Sacred groves conserve biodiversity, host rare and endemic species, and contribute to ecosystem services. UGC NET 2019. Q. Which type of protected area allows traditional activities like grazing and collection of non-timber forest products under strict conditions? Wildlife sanctuary. UGC NET 2021. Previous year questions with answers. Q. What is the primary difference between a national park and a wildlife sanctuary in India? National parks have stricter regulations and do not allow any human activity, while wildlife sanctuaries may allow some human activities such as grazing under regulated conditions. UGC NET 2020. Q. Which of the following is a major role of sacred groves in India? Sacred groves conserve biodiversity, host rare and endemic species, and contribute to ecosystem services. UGC NET 2019. Q. Which type of protected area allows traditional activities like grazing and collection of non-timber forest products under strict conditions? Wildlife sanctuary. UGC NET 2021. Q. Sacred groves in India are primarily maintained by local communities based on religious and cultural beliefs. UGC NET 2018. Q. In India, what is the main function of community reserves? Community reserves aim to conserve biodiversity with the active participation of local communities. UGC NET 2020. Q. Which of the following is a major challenge faced by sacred groves? Encroachment and deforestation due to urbanization and industrialization. UGC NET 2022. Conclusion. Protected areas and sacred groves are integral to biodiversity conservation in India, each offering unique contributions to maintaining ecological balance. Protected areas, including national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, conservation reserves, and community reserves, provide legal frameworks for the conservation of species and habitats, while sacred groves represent a deep connection between culture and nature, preserving biodiversity through traditional knowledge. Understanding their significance, management, and challenges is essential for UGC NetJR environmental science aspirants, as these topics are often featured in the exam, both in theory and through application-based questions. You said, concepts of gene pool. ChatGPT said, concept of gene pool. UGC NetJR environmental science, high-level lecture with maximum word limit, paragraph format, based on previous year questions and key areas. The gene pool refers to the complete set of genetic material alleles present within an interbreeding population or species. It encompasses all the genetic variations within a species or population, including the genes that are inherited by offspring from their parents. The gene pool plays a critical role in the process of evolution, as it influences the genetic diversity and adaptability of a population to changing environmental conditions. The concept of the gene pool is central to population genetics and evolutionary biology, helping to understand how traits are passed on and how genetic diversity influences the survival and adaptation of species over time. In simple terms, a gene pool is a total collection of alleles, different versions of a gene, that can be found in a population. These alleles may exist in different frequencies, and the diversity of alleles within a gene pool determines the potential for genetic variation in future generations. The size and diversity of a gene pool are essential for the health and survival of a population, as genetic diversity enables populations to adapt to changes in the environment, resist diseases, and avoid inbreeding depression. Key aspects of the gene pool. Genetic diversity. The gene pool includes all the genetic variants, alleles for each gene present in the population. Genetic diversity refers to the variety of different alleles for a given gene, and this diversity is important because it helps populations adapt to environmental changes, resist diseases, and reduce the risks of extinction. Higher genetic diversity within a gene pool generally means better adaptability to environmental pressures such as climate change, predation, and food shortages. Allele frequency. Allele frequency refers to how often a particular allele appears in the gene pool of a population. This frequency is influenced by factors such as mutation, migration, natural selection, and genetic drift. The frequencies of different alleles in a gene pool determine the overall genetic makeup of a population. When populations are isolated or subjected to selective pressures, changes in allele frequency may lead to evolutionary changes over generations. Mutation. Mutations are the ultimate source of new genetic material. They occur when there are changes in the DNA sequence of an organism's genome. The gene pool refers to the complete set of genetic material alleles present within an interbreeding population or species. It encompasses all the genetic variations within a species or population, including the genes that are inherited by offspring from their parents. The gene pool plays a critical role in the process of evolution, as it influences the genetic diversity and adaptability of a population to changing environmental conditions. The concept of the gene pool is central to population genetics and evolutionary biology, helping to understand how traits are passed on and how genetic diversity influences the survival and adaptation of species over time. In simple terms, a gene pool is a total collection of alleles, different versions of a gene, that can be found in a population. These alleles may exist in different frequencies, and the diversity of alleles within a gene pool determines the potential for genetic variation in future generations. The size and diversity of a gene pool are essential for the health and survival of a population, as genetic diversity enables populations to adapt to changes in the environment, resist diseases, and avoid inbreeding depression. Key aspects of the gene pool. Genetic diversity. The gene pool includes all the genetic variants, alleles for each gene present in the population. Genetic diversity refers to the variety of different alleles for a given gene, and this diversity is important because it helps populations adapt to environmental changes, resist diseases, and reduce the risks of extinction. Higher genetic diversity within a gene pool generally means better adaptability to environmental pressures such as climate change, predation, and food shortages. Allele frequency. Allele frequency refers to how often a particular allele appears in the gene pool of a population. This frequency is influenced by factors such as mutation, migration, natural selection, and genetic drift. The frequencies of different alleles in a gene pool determine the overall genetic makeup of a population. When populations are isolated or subjected to selective pressures, changes in allele frequency may lead to evolutionary changes over generations. Mutation. Mutations are the ultimate source of new genetic material. They occur when there are changes in the DNA sequence of an organism's genome. These mutations can introduce new alleles into the gene pool, increasing genetic variation. Although most mutations are neutral or harmful, some mutations may confer an adaptive advantage, which can enhance the survival of the species under specific environmental conditions. Gene flow. Gene flow is the transfer of genetic material between different populations of the same species. This occurs through migration, where individuals from one population move to another, carrying their alleles with them. Gene flow tends to reduce genetic differences between populations, as the exchange of genetic material increases allele diversity within the gene pool of the recipient population. Genetic drift. Genetic drift is a random change in allele frequencies in a population due to chance events. This phenomenon is more pronounced in small populations, where random events such as the disaster or the death of individuals with specific alleles can cause a significant loss of genetic variation. Over time, genetic drift may result in the loss of certain alleles from the gene pool, reducing genetic diversity. Natural selection. Natural selection is the process by which certain traits become more common in a population due to their adaptive value in a particular environment. Alleles that confer advantageous traits increase in frequency within the gene pool, while alleles that confer disadvantageous traits decrease in frequency. Over generations, natural selection leads to the gradual adaptation of populations to their environments. Inbreeding and genetic bottlenecks. Inbreeding occurs when individuals in a population breed with closely related individuals, leading to a decrease in genetic diversity. This can result in the expression of harmful recessive alleles and an increased risk of genetic disorders. A genetic bottleneck occurs when a population is drastically reduced in size due to a catastrophe or other factors, leading to a reduction in the gene pool and a loss of genetic diversity. Importance of the gene pool. Evolutionary adaptation. A large and diverse gene pool allows a population to adapt to changing environmental conditions. Over time, as natural selection acts on the available genetic variations, beneficial traits become more prevalent in the population, leading to evolutionary changes. A limited gene pool, on the other hand, can reduce the ability of a population to adapt to new challenges. Conservation of biodiversity. The concept of the gene pool is crucial in conservation biology, as preserving genetic diversity is essential for the survival of species. In endangered populations, maintaining a healthy gene pool can help prevent inbreeding depression and reduce the risks associated with genetic drift. Conservation efforts such as habitat protection, captive breeding programs, and the establishment of genetic reserves aim to protect the gene pools of threatened species. Disease resistance. Genetic diversity within a population's gene pool can enhance disease resistance. A genetically diverse population is more likely to have individuals with alleles that provide immunity or resistance to diseases. This is particularly important for species that face emerging diseases or environmental stressors. Human impact on gene pools. Human activities, such as habitat destruction, pollution, and overexploitation of resources, can affect gene pools by reducing genetic diversity. This may make populations more susceptible to extinction. Furthermore, habitat fragmentation can isolate populations, preventing gene flow and leading to the development of smaller, genetically impoverished populations that are at greater risk. Previous year questions with answers Q. What does the gene pool of a population consist of? The gene pool consists of all the alleles present in the population, representing the genetic material available for inheritance. UGC-NET 2020. Q. Which of the following factors leads to changes in allele frequencies within a population's gene pool? Mutation, gene flow, genetic drift, and natural selection. UGC-NET 2021. Q. How does genetic diversity within a gene pool benefit a population? Genetic diversity enhances the ability of a population to adapt to environmental changes, resist diseases, and reduce inbreeding depression. UGC-NET 2019. Q. Which of the following is a result of genetic drift in a small population? Random changes in allele frequencies that may lead to a loss of genetic variation. UGC-NET 2018. Previous year questions with answers Q. What does the gene pool of a population consist of? The gene pool consists of all the alleles present in the population, representing the genetic material available for inheritance. UGC-NET 2020. Q. Which of the following factors leads to changes in allele frequencies within a population's gene pool? Mutation, gene flow, genetic drift. Previous year questions with answers Q. What does the gene pool of a population consist of? The gene pool consists of all the alleles present in the population, representing the genetic material available for inheritance. UGC-NET 2020. Q. Which of the following factors leads to changes in allele frequencies within a population's gene pool? Mutation, gene flow, genetic drift, and natural selection. UGC-NET 2021. Q. How does genetic diversity within a gene pool benefit a population? Genetic diversity enhances the ability of a population to adapt to environmental changes, resist diseases, and reduce inbreeding depression. UGC-NET 2019. Q. Which of the following is a result of genetic drift in a small population? Random changes in allele frequencies that may lead to a loss of genetic variation. UGC-NET 2018. Q. What is the effect of gene flow on a population's gene pool? Gene flow increases genetic diversity by introducing new alleles from other populations. UGC-NET 2022. Conclusion. The gene pool is a fundamental concept in understanding evolutionary biology and population genetics. It defines the total genetic diversity available within a population and plays a crucial role in the survival, adaptation, and evolution of species. A diverse gene pool is essential for the long-term survival of species, especially in the face of environmental changes, diseases, and other evolutionary pressures. By maintaining genetic diversity through various mechanisms like mutation, gene flow, and natural selection, populations are better equipped to face the challenges of a dynamic environment. The concept of the gene pool is thus vital for both evolutionary theory and conservation biology, and it remains an important topic in exams like UGC-NET JRF Environmental Science. You said. Biopiracy and bioprospecting. ChatGPT said. Biopiracy and bioprospecting. UGC-NET JRF Environmental Science. High-level lecture with maximum word limit. Paragraph format based on previous year questions in key areas. Biopiracy and bioprospecting are two related but distinct concepts within the field of biodiversity and environmental ethics. They are particularly important in discussions surrounding the use and protection of biological resources, particularly in relation to indigenous knowledge, traditional medicine, and the commercial exploitation of biodiversity. Both terms have significant implications for conservation, intellectual property rights, and the rights of local communities and indigenous people. Biopiracy. Biopiracy refers to the unethical or illegal practice of exploiting biological resources, often from developing countries, without compensating the local communities or countries from which these resources are derived. It generally involves the patenting of biological materials, including plants, animals, microorganisms, or traditional knowledge that are indigenous to a specific region but are used without permission or fair benefit sharing. The term biopiracy has been coined to describe a situation where corporations, often from industrialized nations, appropriate biological resources and the traditional knowledge associated with them for commercial purposes without providing any significant benefit to the source country or indigenous communities. Biopiracy often occurs when these resources are extracted without proper consent, or when their commercialization is based on the traditional ecological knowledge of local populations who are not recognized or compensated for their contributions. Examples of biopiracy include the patenting of plant species by pharmaceutical or biotechnology companies for the development of new drugs without compensating the indigenous people who have long used these plants in traditional medicine. One of the most famous cases of biopiracy involves the patenting of the turmeric plant by a U.S. company in the 1990s, despite the long-standing use of turmeric by Indian farmers for its medicinal properties. Key aspects of biopiracy. Intellectual property rights (IPR) issues. Biopiracy highlights the lack of protection for the intellectual property rights of indigenous communities. While multinational companies may secure patents on biologically derived products or traditional knowledge, the original source often does not receive any recognition or monetary compensation for the contribution to the discovery or utilization of these resources. Exploitation of indigenous knowledge. Local communities, especially indigenous peoples, have valuable knowledge regarding the medicinal, agricultural, and ecological use of local plant and animal species. Biopiracy often involves the extraction of this knowledge without consent, with no benefits flowing back to the community or country of origin. International legal frameworks. Several international agreements have been put in place to prevent biopiracy, such as the Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD) and the Nagoya Protocol, which aims to ensure that the benefits of biodiversity and traditional knowledge are shared fairly and equitably between commercial entities and the countries of origin. Examples of biopiracy. The patenting of neem and basmati rights by companies outside India, despite these being integral parts of Indian culture and agriculture. The appropriation of hoodia by pharmaceutical companies for weight loss products, despite the knowledge of its use for hunger suppression being well known to the indigenous San people of southern Africa. Bioprospecting. Bioprospecting, on the other hand, is a more ethically aligned process that involves the exploration, collection, and investigation of biological resources, plants, animals, microorganisms for potential commercial applications, especially in the fields of pharmaceuticals, agriculture, and biotechnology. Bioprospecting can lead to the discovery of new medicinal compounds, enzymes, and other valuable bioproducts that can benefit society at large. Bioprospecting typically involves the identification of biologically active substances found in nature, which may have medicinal or industrial applications. Unlike biopiracy, bioprospecting is ideally conducted with the prior informed consent of the country or community from which the biological resources are sourced, and it includes agreements for benefit sharing. This means that both the resources and the knowledge about their uses are shared in a way that compensates local communities and ensures that they benefit from the economic potential of these resources. In bioprospecting, there is often a formal agreement or contract between companies and the source country, detailing how profits will be shared and how intellectual property rights will be handled. Bioprospecting is generally viewed as a positive practice when it is conducted ethically, with clear guidelines for sharing benefits and respecting the rights of local communities. Key aspects of bioprospecting. Ethical and legal practices. Ethical bioprospecting is based on principles such as prior informed consent (PIC) and mutually agreed terms (MAT), which are agreements between commercial entities and the source countries or communities. These agreements are designed to ensure that any benefits derived from the biological resources are shared equitably. Contributions to conservation. Bioprospecting can contribute to conservation efforts by creating economic incentives for the protection of biodiversity. When local communities are able to profit from their natural resources, they are more likely to protect and conserve them, preventing overexploitation and habitat destruction. Potential for drug discovery and biotechnology. Bioprospecting has led to numerous important discoveries in medicine, agriculture, and industry. For instance, the discovery of the anti-cancer drug Taxol, derived from the bark of the Pacific yew tree, is a result of bioprospecting. Similarly, the discovery of numerous antibiotics and enzymes used in biotechnology has been driven by the search for new biological resources. Example of successful bioprospecting. One example of successful bioprospecting is the collaboration between pharmaceutical companies and the Amazonian tribes. In this case, the indigenous people shared the knowledge of the medicinal plants they used, leading to the development of new pharmaceuticals. In return, they received royalties and support for conservation efforts. Biopiracy versus bioprospecting. While both biopiracy and bioprospecting involve the exploration and use of biological resources for commercial purposes, the key difference lies in the ethical considerations, particularly in terms of how the resources are obtained and how the benefits are shared. Biopiracy involves the exploitation of biological resources without proper consent or benefit sharing, often taking advantage of the lack of legal protections in the source countries. In contrast, bioprospecting involves a more formal, ethical approach where agreements are made to ensure that both the commercial entity and the local communities benefit from the use of biological resources. Previous year questions with answers. Q. What is biopiracy and how does it affect indigenous communities? Biopiracy refers to the unauthorized extraction and use of biological resources or traditional knowledge from indigenous communities without providing fair compensation. It often leads to the loss of intellectual property rights for the communities. UGC-NET 2019. Q. Which international agreement aims to prevent biopiracy and ensure fair access to genetic resources? The Nagoya Protocol under the Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD) aims to ensure fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources. UGC-NET 2021. Q. Which of the following is an example of bioprospecting? A. Previous year questions with answers. Q. What is biopiracy and how does it affect indigenous communities? Biopiracy refers to the unauthorized extraction and use of biological resources or traditional knowledge from indigenous communities without providing fair compensation. It often leads to the loss of intellectual property rights for the communities. UGC-NET 2019. Q. Which international agreement aims to prevent biopiracy and ensure fair access to genetic resources? The Nagoya Protocol under the Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD) aims to ensure fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources. UGC-NET 2021. Q. Which of the following is an example of bioprospecting? A. A pharmaceutical company conducting research on medicinal plants with the prior consent of the indigenous community and sharing the profits. UGC-NET 2020. Q. What is the primary difference between biopiracy and bioprospecting? Biopiracy involves the unauthorized use of biological resources, while bioprospecting is a process conducted ethically with consent and benefit sharing agreements. UGC-NET 2022. Q. How can bioprospecting benefit biodiversity conservation? By creating economic incentives for local communities to protect their natural resources, bioprospecting can help conserve biodiversity. UGC-NET 2018. Conclusion. Biopiracy and bioprospecting represent two contrasting approaches to the use of biological resources. Biopiracy is an unethical practice that exploits indigenous knowledge and biodiversity without proper consent or fair compensation. In contrast, bioprospecting, when conducted ethically, can lead to valuable discoveries while ensuring that local communities benefit from their contributions. These concepts are critical to discussions on biodiversity conservation, the rights of indigenous peoples, and the ethical use of genetic resources. Understanding the difference between these two concepts is essential for promoting sustainable practices in the commercial use of biodiversity. You said. Concept of restoration ecology. ChatGPT said. Concept of restoration ecology. UGC-NET JRF Environmental Science. High-level lecture with maximum word limit. Paragraph format based on previous year questions and key areas. Restoration ecology is a scientific discipline that focuses on the restoration and rehabilitation of ecosystems that have been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. The primary goal of restoration ecology is to return ecosystems to a close approximation of their original state, thereby preserving biodiversity, enhancing ecosystem services, and improving the overall health and resilience of the environment. Restoration ecology differs from conservation ecology in that conservation seeks to maintain existing ecosystems, while restoration works to reestablish ecosystems that have already been altered or degraded. Foundational principles of restoration ecology. Restoration ecology is grounded in a few key principles that guide efforts to restore ecosystems. Historical reference. Restoration ecology often uses historical or reference conditions as a baseline to guide restoration efforts. These reference conditions can be derived from historical data, such as records of species composition, vegetation structure, and ecological processes from before the ecosystem was disturbed or degraded. The idea is to recreate conditions that are as close as possible to those that existed naturally before human intervention or environmental degradation. Ecological processes. A focus of restoration ecology is not only on reintroducing native species but also on restoring the natural ecological processes, such as nutrient cycling, water flow, and soil regeneration. These processes are essential for maintaining the long-term health and functionality of ecosystems. Biodiversity restoration. Restoration ecology emphasizes the return of native species, particularly keystone species, which play a critical role in maintaining ecosystem structure and function. The restoration of biodiversity is crucial because ecosystems with higher biodiversity are more resilient to disturbances and have better capacity to provide ecosystem services. Adaptive management. Restoration ecology often employs an adaptive management approach, which involves monitoring and adjusting restoration strategies based on the outcomes and new knowledge gained during the process. Restoration projects can face unforeseen challenges, and adaptive management allows for the flexibility to make necessary changes over time. Types of restoration and restoration ecology. Ecological restoration. This refers to the process of restoring an ecosystem to its natural state, typically by returning native species, improving habitat conditions, and re-establishing natural ecological processes. Ecological restoration can be applied to various ecosystems, including forests, wetlands, grasslands, and marine environments. Rehabilitation. Rehabilitation involves improving the structure and function of an ecosystem but does not necessarily aim to return it to its original state. Instead, rehabilitation focuses on restoring the ecological processes and services of an ecosystem to a level where it can support biodiversity and provide essential ecosystem services. Reclamation. Reclamation is a more intensive form of restoration that involves the reworking or restructuring of ecosystems that have been severely degraded, such as mined lands or areas affected by industrial. Restoration ecology is a scientific discipline that focuses on the restoration and rehabilitation of ecosystems that have been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. The primary goal of restoration ecology is to return ecosystems to a close approximation of their original state, thereby preserving biodiversity, enhancing ecosystem services, and improving the overall health and resilience of the environment. Restoration ecology differs from conservation ecology in that conservation seeks to maintain existing ecosystems, while restoration works to reestablish ecosystems that have already been altered or degraded. Foundational principles of restoration ecology. Restoration ecology is grounded in a few key principles that guide efforts to restore ecosystems. Historical reference. Restoration ecology often uses historical or reference conditions as a baseline to guide restoration efforts. These reference conditions can be derived from historical data, such as records of species composition, vegetation structure, and ecological processes from before the ecosystem was disturbed or degraded. The idea is to recreate conditions that are as close as possible to those that existed naturally before human intervention or environmental degradation. Ecological processes. A focus of restoration ecology is not only on reintroducing native species but also on restoring the natural ecological processes, such as nutrient cycling, water flow, and soil regeneration. These processes are essential for maintaining the long-term health and functionality of ecosystems. Biodiversity restoration. Restoration ecology emphasizes the return of native species, particularly keystone species, which play a critical role in maintaining ecosystem structure and function. The restoration of biodiversity is crucial because ecosystems with higher biodiversity are more resilient to disturbances and have better capacity to provide ecosystem services. Adaptive management. Restoration ecology often employs an adaptive management approach, which involves monitoring and adjusting restoration strategies based on the outcomes and new knowledge gained during the process. Restoration projects can face unforeseen challenges, and adaptive management allows for the flexibility to make necessary changes over time. Types of restoration and restoration ecology. Ecological restoration. This refers to the process of restoring an ecosystem to its natural state, typically by returning native species, improving habitat conditions, and re-establishing natural ecological processes. Ecological restoration can be applied to various ecosystems, including forests, wetlands, grasslands, and marine environments. Rehabilitation. Rehabilitation involves improving the structure and function of an ecosystem but does not necessarily aim to return it to its original state. Instead, rehabilitation focuses on restoring the ecological processes and services of an ecosystem to a level where it can support biodiversity and provide essential ecosystem services. Reclamation. Reclamation is a more intensive form of restoration that involves the reworking or restructuring of ecosystems that have been severely degraded, such as mined lands or areas affected by industrial pollution. Reclamation often requires the removal of pollutants, soil conditioning, and replanting of native species. Revegetation. This is a restoration technique that focuses on the planting or reintroduction of native plant species to reestablish a plant community. Revegetation is particularly common in areas affected by deforestation, overgrazing, or agriculture. Restoration ecology is a scientific discipline that focuses on the restoration and rehabilitation of ecosystems that have been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. The primary goal of restoration ecology is to return ecosystems to a close approximation of their original state, thereby preserving biodiversity, enhancing ecosystem services, and improving the overall health and resilience of the environment. Restoration ecology differs from conservation ecology in that conservation seeks to maintain existing ecosystems, while restoration works to reestablish ecosystems that have already been altered or degraded. Foundational principles of restoration ecology. Restoration ecology is grounded in a few key principles that guide efforts to restore ecosystems. Historical reference. Restoration ecology often uses historical or reference conditions as a baseline to guide restoration efforts. These reference conditions can be derived from historical data, such as records of species composition, vegetation structure, and ecological processes from before the ecosystem was disturbed or degraded. The idea is to recreate conditions that are as close as possible to those that existed naturally before human intervention or environmental degradation. Ecological processes. A focus of restoration ecology is not only on reintroducing native species but also on restoring the natural ecological processes, such as nutrient cycling, water flow, and soil regeneration. These processes are essential for maintaining the long-term health and functionality of ecosystems. Biodiversity restoration. Restoration ecology emphasizes the return of native species, particularly keystone species, which play a critical role in maintaining ecosystem structure and function. The restoration of biodiversity is crucial because ecosystems with higher biodiversity are more resilient to disturbances and have better capacity to provide ecosystem services. Adaptive management. Restoration ecology often employs an adaptive management approach, which involves monitoring and adjusting restoration strategies based on the outcomes and new knowledge gained during the process. Restoration projects can face unforeseen challenges, and adaptive management allows for the flexibility to make necessary changes over time. Types of restoration and restoration ecology. Ecological restoration. This refers to the process of restoring an ecosystem to its natural state, typically by returning native species, improving habitat conditions, and re-establishing natural ecological processes. Ecological restoration can be applied to various ecosystems, including forests, wetlands, grasslands, and marine environments. Rehabilitation. Rehabilitation involves improving the structure and function of an ecosystem but does not necessarily aim to return it to its original state. Instead, rehabilitation focuses on restoring the ecological processes and services of an ecosystem to a level where it can support biodiversity and provide essential ecosystem services. Reclamation. Reclamation is a more intensive form of restoration that involves the reworking or restructuring of ecosystems that have been severely degraded, such as mined lands or areas affected by industrial pollution. Reclamation often requires the removal of pollutants, soil conditioning, and replanting of native species. Revegetation. This is a restoration technique that focuses on the planting or reintroduction of native plant species to reestablish a plant community. Revegetation is particularly common in areas affected. Types of restoration and restoration ecology. Ecological restoration. This refers to the process of restoring an ecosystem to its natural state, typically by returning native species, improving habitat conditions, and re-establishing natural ecological processes. Ecological restoration can be applied to various ecosystems, including forests, wetlands, grasslands, and marine environments. Rehabilitation. Rehabilitation involves improving the structure and function of an ecosystem but does not necessarily aim to return it to its original state. Instead, rehabilitation focuses on restoring the ecological processes and services of an ecosystem to a level where it can support biodiversity and provide essential ecosystem services. Reclamation. Reclamation is a more intensive form of restoration that involves the reworking or restructuring of ecosystems that have been severely degraded, such as mined lands or areas affected by industrial pollution. Reclamation often requires the removal of pollutants, soil conditioning, and replanting of native species. Revegetation. This is a restoration technique that focuses on the planting or reintroduction of native plant species to reestablish a plant community. Revegetation is particularly common in areas affected by deforestation, overgrazing, or agriculture. Assisted migration. In some cases, climate change and other factors may cause species to shift their ranges. Assisted migration involves helping Rehabilitation. Rehabilitation involves improving the structure and function of an ecosystem but does not necessarily aim to return it to its original state. Instead, rehabilitation focuses on restoring the ecological processes and services of an ecosystem to a level where it can support biodiversity and provide essential ecosystem services. Reclamation. Reclamation is a more intensive form of restoration that involves the reworking or restructuring of ecosystems that have been severely degraded, such as mined lands or areas affected by industrial pollution. Reclamation often requires the removal of pollutants, soil conditioning, and replanting of native species. Revegetation. This is a restoration technique that focuses on the planting or reintroduction of native plant species to reestablish the plant community. Revegetation is particularly common in areas affected by deforestation, overgrazing, or agriculture. Assisted migration. In some cases, climate change and other factors may cause species to shift their ranges. Assisted migration involves helping species move to areas where they may be better suited for survival in the future, often in response to changing environmental conditions. Importance of restoration ecology. Biodiversity conservation. Restoration ecology is crucial for conserving biodiversity, especially in regions that have been heavily impacted by human activities. By restoring habitats and ecosystems, we can provide a better environment for endangered species and help prevent further species extinctions. Climate change mitigation. Restored ecosystems, particularly forests and wetlands, play an important role in sequestering carbon dioxide and mitigating the effects of climate change. Wetlands, for instance, can store large amounts of carbon in their soils, while forests act as carbon sinks. Restoration projects can enhance the capacity of ecosystems to absorb and store carbon. Ecosystem services. Healthy ecosystems provide a wide range of essential services, such as water purification, soil fertility, flood regulation, and pollination. Restoration efforts can help to reinstate these services, benefiting human communities and contributing to ecological balance. Economic benefits. Restoring ecosystems can also have economic benefits, particularly through the restoration of ecosystem services. For example, wetland restoration can improve water quality and reduce the cost of water treatment, while forest restoration can enhance timber production and recreational opportunities. Resilience building. Restoration helps increase the resilience of ecosystems, making them better able to withstand future disturbances, such as extreme weather events, diseases, or invasive species. Resilient ecosystems are better equipped to adapt to changing environmental conditions and provide long-term sustainability. Challenges in restoration ecology. Resource limitations. Restoration projects often face constraints in terms of financial resources, manpower, and time. Ecosystem restoration can be costly and labor-intensive, requiring significant investment over long periods before results are seen. Invasive species. The presence of invasive species can hinder restoration efforts, as these species may outcompete native plants and animals, disrupting ecological processes. Removing invasive species is often a critical first step in successful restoration projects. Climate change. Climate change can alter the conditions necessary for the success of restoration efforts. For instance, rising temperatures or shifting precipitation patterns may make it more difficult to restore certain ecosystems, particularly if the climate has changed significantly from the historical baseline. Social and political factors. Restoration projects can be complicated by social and political factors, such as land ownership disputes, conflicting interests, or lack of community involvement. Successful restoration efforts often require the cooperation of local communities, government agencies, and non-governmental organizations (NGOs). Ecological uncertainty. Restoring an ecosystem to its historical condition may be difficult, as the ecological conditions may no longer be the same due to long-term environmental changes, such as land use change, pollution, or species loss. As a result, restoration may not always result in a complete return to the original state, requiring a more pragmatic approach. Previous year questions with answers. Q. What is the primary goal of restoration ecology? The primary goal of restoration ecology is to restore degraded ecosystems to a condition that approximates their natural, pre-disturbance state, thereby conserving biodiversity and improving ecosystem function. UGC/NET 2019. Q. Which of the following is a key principle of restoration ecology? A. A key principle of restoration ecology is the use of historical reference conditions as a baseline for guiding restoration efforts. UGC/NET 2020. Q. How does restoration ecology contribute to climate change mitigation? Restoration ecology helps mitigate climate change by restoring ecosystems, such as forests and wetlands, which act as carbon sinks and sequester carbon dioxide. UGC/NET 2021. Q. What is the difference between ecological restoration and rehabilitation? Ecological restoration aims to return an ecosystem to its original state, while rehabilitation focuses on improving the structure and function of an ecosystem without necessarily returning it to its original state. UGC/NET 2018. Q. What is the role of biodiversity in restoration ecology? Biodiversity plays a critical role in restoration ecology by ensuring the resilience and sustainability of restored ecosystems, as diverse ecosystems are better able to adapt to disturbances and provide essential ecosystem services. UGC/NET 2022. Conclusion. Restoration ecology is a dynamic and essential field that aims to repair the damage caused to ecosystems by human activities and natural disturbances. By focusing on the restoration of biodiversity, ecosystem processes, and services, restoration ecology plays a critical role in conserving global biodiversity, mitigating climate change, and improving environmental health. Despite the challenges associated with restoration efforts, such as resource limitations, invasive species, and climate change, restoration ecology continues to offer solutions for improving the resilience and sustainability of ecosystems around the world. You said. Extinct, rare, endangered, and threatened flora and fauna of India.no table ChatGPT said. Extinct, rare, endangered, and threatened flora and fauna of India. UGC/NET JRF Environmental Science, high-level lecture with maximum word limit, paragraph format, based on previous year questions in key areas. India, with its rich biodiversity and unique ecosystems, is home to a diverse range of flora and fauna. However, the country's rapid urbanization, industrialization, deforestation, and habitat destruction have led to the decline and threat to many species. The classification of species into extinct, rare, endangered, and threatened categories is crucial for understanding conservation priorities and implementing effective protection measures. The conservation status of species is determined by international organizations such as the International Union for Conservation of Nature (IUCN), which categorizes species based on the risk of extinction. Extinct flora and fauna of India. Extinction refers to the complete disappearance of a species from the planet. In India, a number of plant and animal species have gone extinct, mainly due to habitat loss, hunting, and overexploitation. Flora. Rheum australis Himalayan rhubarb. This plant species, native to the high altitudes of the Himalayas, has been declared extinct due to overharvesting for medicinal use and habitat destruction. Cinnametra ramiflora, Indian rosewood, once found in tropical forests. This species is believed to be extinct, primarily due to logging and habitat conversion for agriculture. Fauna. Indian cheetah Acinonyx jubatus venaticus. The Indian cheetah, once found across the Indian subcontinent, was declared extinct in India in the 1950s due to hunting, habitat destruction, and loss of prey species. Rheum australis Himalayan rhubarb. This plant species, native to the high altitudes of the Himalayas, has been declared extinct due to overharvesting for medicinal use and habitat destruction. Cinnametra ramiflora, Indian rosewood, once found in tropical forests. This species is believed to be extinct, primarily due to logging and habitat conversion for agriculture. Fauna. Indian cheetah Acinonyx jubatus venaticus. The Indian cheetah, once found across the Indian subcontinent, was declared extinct in India in the 1950s due to hunting, habitat destruction, and loss of prey species. Javan tiger Panthera tigris sondaiga. The Javan tiger, once native to the island of Java, is considered extinct due to habitat destruction and hunting. The pink-headed duck Rhodonus acariophilicia. This species, which was native to wetlands in India, was last reported in the early 20th century and is now considered extinct due to habitat loss and hunting. Rare flora and fauna of India. Rare species are those that are not necessarily endangered but are found in very limited populations or specific areas. These species require conservation attention to prevent them from becoming endangered or extinct. Flora. Edelweiss leontopodium alpinum. This beautiful alpine flower, found in the higher reaches of the Himalayas, is rare and highly prized for its medicinal properties. Sundari tree Caratiera fomes, a rare tree species found in the mangrove forests of the Sundarbans. This tree is important for coastal ecosystems and is under threat due to the loss of mangrove habitats. Fauna. Himalayan monal Lophophorus impohanus. The state bird of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. This striking bird is rare and found in the higher Himalayan ranges. The species is under threat due to habitat destruction and hunting. Nilgiri tar, Nilgiri trigus hylocrius, a rare mountain goat species found in the Nilgiri hills of southern India. The Nilgiri tar faces threats from habitat loss and human encroachment. Endangered flora and fauna of India. Endangered species are those that are at high risk of extinction in the near future, primarily due to human-induced factors such as habitat destruction, poaching, and climate change. Flora. Sausage tree Kichlia africana, found in parts of India's northeastern region. This tree is classified as endangered due to habitat destruction and overexploitation for its fruit, which has medicinal properties. Indian ghost tree Erythrina variegata, an endangered species found in coastal regions of India. It is threatened by habitat loss due to coastal development. Fauna. Bengal tiger Panthera tigris tigris. The Bengal tiger is one of the most iconic endangered species of India. It faces threats from poaching, habitat destruction, and human-wildlife conflict. Conservation efforts have been made through Project Tiger, but the species remains endangered. Indian elephant Elephas maximus indicus. The Indian elephant is endangered due to habitat fragmentation, poaching for tusks, and human-elephant conflict. The population of these elephants has significantly reduced, and they are now primarily confined to protected areas and reserves.